Hagar, Sarah, Ishmael, and Isaac. Family conflict, jealousy, and God's care for the rejected. What happens when our decisions create problems that last for generations? The story of Abraham, Sarah, Hagar, Ishmael, and Isaac is one of the most emotional stories in Genesis. It begins with impatience, grows into jealousy and conflict, and ends with a powerful reminder that God sees and cares for those who feel forgotten. Welcome to Genesis, Behind the Story. Today we're looking at Genesis 16 and Genesis 21 and the complicated relationship between Sarah, Hagar, Abraham, Ishmael, and Isaac. At first glance, this story looks like a family dispute. But behind the story are lessons about waiting on God's timing, dealing with jealousy, living with the consequences of our choices, and trusting that God sees us even when others reject us. Let's look behind the story. When we try to help God, God promised Abraham and Sarah a son, but years passed and the promise had not yet happened. Sarah became impatient. She suggested that Abraham have a child through her servant Hagar. Abraham agreed, and Hagar became pregnant with Ishmael. What began as a human solution eventually created years of family tension. Life lesson. Sometimes our greatest problems begin when we try to force what God has promised. God's promises do not need our shortcuts. Jealousy changes relationships. Once Hagar became pregnant, tension developed between the two women. Sarah became resentful. Hagar became proud. The relationship quickly deteriorated. Jealousy and pride often destroy relationships that once seemed peaceful. Life lesson. When comparison enters a relationship, conflict often follows. God sees the person. Everyone else overlooks. When Hagar fled into the wilderness, God met her there. He spoke to her and encouraged her. Hagar called God, the God who sees me. Even though she felt rejected and alone, God knew exactly where she was. Life lesson. You may feel forgotten by people, but you are never forgotten by God. Not everyone can walk into your next season. Years later, Isaac was born. The promised child finally arrived. During Isaac's celebration, Sarah observed Ishmael mocking or making fun of Isaac. Sarah immediately became concerned and told Abraham that Hagar and Ishmael should leave. This was painful for Abraham because Ishmael was also his son. Yet God reassured Abraham that he would care for Ishmael. Life lesson. Not everyone who starts a journey with you will continue into the next season with you. Sometimes God has different purposes for different people. God cares for both sides. One of the beautiful things about this story is that God did not choose one child and abandon the other. Isaac carried the covenant promise. But God also blessed Ishmael. God protected him, provided for him, and made him into a great nation. Life lesson. God's blessings are not limited. God can fulfill his plan for one person without forgetting another. The story of Sarah, Hagar, Isaac, and Ishmael reminds us that impatience creates complications, jealousy creates division, but God's mercy reaches everyone involved. He saw Sarah. He saw Hagar. He cared for Isaac. He cared for Ishmael. And he still sees us today. No matter what family conflict, disappointment, or rejection you may be facing, remember this: the God who saw Hagar in the wilderness still sees you. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Genesis Behind the Story. If this message encouraged you, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, which lesson from the story of Sarah, Hagar, Isaac, and Ishmael spoke to you the most? Stories by Anna. Faith. Hope. Life lessons.